Oh man, I love these marathon council sessions. Woohoo! Right, I know you don't believe me when I say that. I just wanted to, happy to answer any questions. I wanted to give you some updates. We're down to just about 9,300 households without power, which is a huge improvement. And there are only 2 high water locations currently being monitored by HPD, or actually only one. I see Allen Parkway in Montrose, which is nearby, but the I-45 northbound at State Highway 242, 59, and that's the frontage road, not the highway itself. I think all the main lanes are passable. We have traffic movement on all our freeways, but I-45 northbound at State Highway 242, some frontage road problems still. 59 East Tex northbound at San Jacinto River and southbound at San Jacinto River. You cannot come under to do a U-turn, but the 59 is operating normally. State Highway 6 at Savannah Parkway, there's still some issues there. State Highway 6 at Grand Boulevard, one of the main lanes, but others are open. And FM 2920 after State Highway 249, Tomball Parkway, they still have all the main lanes shut down there. But the challenge yesterday, among others, was the fact that some parts of the city had really very little impact, and other parts of the city were hit very, very hard, and trying to have messages for everybody. And first and foremost, being concerned about the potential loss of life. And we keep revising the number. We now have confirmed that we have 6 fatalities and 1 known still missing, and we're going to continue a recovery search for him, and that we should we'll obviously report as soon as possible. 3 of those who we lost were in vehicles that went into underpasses with a sufficient or significant amount of water. And while the bios coming over their banks is a fairly rare occurrence, unfortunately, having water in our street system, which is part of our overall drainage infrastructure, is something that it's part of the way it's built. And while many of our intersections have flood gauges, some of them have gates and so forth, or barriers when water reaches a certain depth. This is just something that we have to really impress upon folks, that turn around, don't drown, that as you see rising water, you've got to be patient and pull over. Again, current situation, we've been catching a little bit of a break from the weather. We're only actively monitoring the northwest, Cypress Creek kind of area, Spring Creek, and the amount of water in the Lake Houston, Lake Conroe, and how much they're having to release coming downstream. We had sort of windshield estimates yesterday of structural damage to properties, and we still think that there may be a few thousand properties that had water inside, which is different from have they experienced structural damage or significant flooding. But there's, at this point, the estimate's been revised downward from that total number of about 1,400 structures with that may have structural damage, but we're going to continue the assessment and try to get a good number on that. And the reason it's it's, again, we're going to do whatever we do, but the reason that that's important as we quantify that, it's tied to our request for FEMA assistance under the state's disaster declaration. We did have one water treatment plant in Marland that was submerged, but it was quickly shut in, no impact on the water. And I want to emphasize, the City of Houston's drinking water is fine. We've had no impacts whatsoever. There are some folks scattered around Houston and in the broader community that have their private wells. And if their property and their wells were underwater, they can contact the City of Houston, and we're happy to test the water for them before they start using it again. And if they, until they could be tested, we're happy we suggest that they boil the water, but we're happy to test because we want to make sure everybody is safe there. And we had one wastewater plant inundation. That was the Southwest Wastewater Treatment Plant on Beech Nut. Again, it's Braze Bio. Got submerged, and there was a release of untreated wastewater into the bio at that point, and will report to TCEQ, but no impact on separate drinking water system, and we're just making a public declaration of that. I know most of you all have the information on those we lost, and I don't have any names to release at this point. The medical examiner's office has not, I don't think, formally released any of those remains, and when that happens, obviously you'll be notified. Still asking folks if they have structural damage to their homes, call 311. We've released the number to all of you about if cars are towed. What's it, 1,083, something like that? 1,083 cars that were towed across the City of Houston. Better to leave your car and have to go find it again later than to stay in the floodwaters. And so it is. But I did ask earlier, and I'm going to turn, not a good press conference here, I'm going to turn and say, are we working to give them, like 24 hours or something, so we can give them, we're still working it on the storage. You're going to get charged for the tow, but we're hoping to be able to give some relief on the storage charges. I think that's all I have to report at this point. I'm happy to answer questions.
Mayor, when was the last body discovered? Was that
today, this morning.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
This was West Park at,
Southwest Ring.
yeah.
And that was one of the had been missing. Now it's a confirmed fatality, correct?
Wasn't the one that we were showing as missing. The person that we were showing as missing, we had the water rescue yesterday we had 2 firefighters and 4 civilians. The boat struck something in the water and flipped over. The 2 firefighters and 1 of the civilians made it to shore. 3 people were swept away. Those were ones we were calling missing. 1 of those people is still missing. We did not know about this particular, we had eyes on those folks when they went in the water, and that's why. So we know there is still 1 person missing.
As of this morning, it was 2 victims unaccounted for and 5 fatalities. And then the 6th came out, but now there's only 1 missing?
Right. One of the folks that we had listed as missing, what they believe that it was one of them that we were.
What's the name of the person that's still missing?
I have not been authorized to release that at this time.
Can you tell us if it's a male, age?
It is a very elderly male. I believe he's in his 80s. It was a family unit that was being evacuated from their flooded home, and man and wife and his daughter. Daughter survived. Wife has recovered. We're looking for them gentlemen.
About the Southwest Waste Plant, 100,000 gallons were spilled, of wastewater were spilled to the area. What is the concern for the residents in that area?
Anytime we have a flooding situation, one of the reasons that we tell people to stay out of the water, even as the water begins to recede, and dangerous situation has subsided, kids want to play in the water and so forth, water was moving fast. It's probably out in the Gulf of Mexico right now, but we don't know that. And the floodwaters, these floodwaters have been moving across large swaths of territory. You have no clue what may be in the water. So we really want people to stay out of the water. Again, it's not didn't have any impact on our water supply for the city of Houston, but the water itself. Let the floodwaters drain. Stay out of the water. Stay away from the water. Again, and even what appears to be shallow floodwaters could, things happen, manhole covers get popped up and swept away. And so folks will be out, cruising through their neighborhood and step in and are gone into the storm sewer system. So everybody just needs to be aware and careful in the water.
The wastewater plant, you mentioned no threat to the water here in the city. What was the extent of testing conducted to make sure that that was in fact the case?
Well, we test our water supply on a regular and routine basis. This wastewater treatment plant, the overflow was into Brays Bayou during the flood. So I don't know what you're talking about in terms of.
Sure, just the test conducted after this.
No, I mean we know how much we know what the outfall or the excursion is. I think the term they use. We know what the excursion was, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time testing the floodwaters because we know there's a whole lot of other stuff. Again, the floodwaters have picked up. Stay out of the water. Our focus is on making sure that the drinking water is safe, and we'll follow all of the protocols outlined by TCEQ.
Sure, you talked about the boat that capsized and the 3 people on. Again, 2 people accounted for, 1 person still missing. Do you know what the boat struck, or where does that investigation stand currently?
There's no investigation. We were all, in fact, we were in the emergency command center, and there was a helicopter overhead. There's no telling. It could have been a tree. It could have been anything carried by the water. It was under the surface of the water. The boat went over it, flipped the motor up, started spinning the boat, and it went sideways to the current, and that was it.
Can you talk a little bit about city infrastructure damage? I know number of police cars, so forth damaged. What's the latest count when it comes to that stuff?
I'm sorry, you asked a question about someone had
city infrastructure. What kind of damage we're looking at? Police cars, so on and so forth.
Lots of different types of city infrastructure. We know we have some damage. Buffalo Bio flowing in to our parking garage, City of Houston's parking garage across the street. Some minor, major investment in the Buffalo Bio Park. It's actually not city dollars. It's foundation dollars. But we know that the new guard shack at the police memorial is at 6 feet of water inside it. There is some of the Parks Department maintenance facility in Memorial Park. Minor stuff. We're going to do a soup to nuts assessment, but those are the highlights for buildings. In terms of vehicles, I had a list. I'm going to ask Mr. Newport to speak to that. Although I have a little bit of difficulty, some of the vehicles, they were went through the shop, and then we were turning them back out as fast as we could. She handed me a little note that showed me, because we're all doing this on the fly. And
you want it or
Chris, come on, the vehicle.
he's got the same note.
Yeah, thanks.
Total of 66 city vehicles were lost or damaged due to the flood. Of the 66, 20 were HFD vehicles, 30 were HPD vehicles, 9 fleet management, 1 Office of Business Opportunity, 1 legal department, 1 Mayor's Office of Special Events, 2 General Services Department, and 2 Public Works and Engineering.
Yeah, the ones like the legal department and so forth, they were just in the bottom of the parking garage.
16 of them. 16.
Yeah, most of it is when we place police cars at these flooded intersections to keep people from driving into the high water. That police car then often ultimately goes into high water, and it's just it's a call we have to make.
As you make the damage assessments, and that will take a while, but it just, unfortunately, we're also starting the budget process. What's the process for incorporating new damage into tweaking the budget?
At this point, we don't really anticipate a major budgetary impact. Again, if you watch the national news, you thought the whole city of Houston was under 20 feet of water or something. But for city facilities, we came through it really well. We are insured, and we're working to see what the liability is for Houston First to have control of our parking garage. For the we have our own automobile vehicle maintenance facilities, and again, that's damaged vehicles. Many of them are already back out on the street because we're running them back out as fast as we can. The fleet will be a concern, and one of the reasons that we have a $20 million emergency fund, cash emergency fund, is to tap in situations like this. And as part of my budget, I had put, I think, $1.25 million in to start inching the number up, so we may be able to cover it with the emergency fund. And with our disaster declaration, these costs and others above and beyond our normal cost of doing business, like overtime and so forth, may be reimbursable by FEMA. So right now, for the city, we don't think it'll have a significant budgetary impact.
Mayor, can you talk about some of the improvements that were made after Tropical Storm Allison, some of the hardening measures that were taken, especially downtown and the medical center? How do you feel like those held up? Were they worth the investment?
The capital improvements that were made, both publicly and privately, after Tropical Storm Allison absolutely proved their worth in this storm. Now, this is probably the most significant flooding we've had since Allison, but it wasn't anything like the scale of Allison, and because Allison was really citywide, and sheet flooding in places that have never flooded. What we had here was flooding in the low-lying areas and the underpasses, not unexpected, and then the bios going over their banks. A lot of the work that was done in water management was done along Braze Bio. Big sections of the bio have been widened, deepened to convey more water. And the medical center invested heavily in floodgates and in moving, relocating assets to keep them out of harm's way. Texas Medical Center was protected, and that in itself was worth the investment that was made along Braze Bio. We got water in because the floodgates were not deployed, but there are a number of other places where floodgates were installed in downtown, where White Oak and Buffalo meet, and that seems to have proven itself because that was another major flood zone. So we're pretty satisfied with how the infrastructure held up. Although that takes me to another issue, that the floodwaters can undermine bridges and overpasses, and we're getting out and making sure that those are safe as soon as the conditions in those areas are safe for our people to be. We're out there to make sure that there's not hidden infrastructure damage.
You mentioned the damage to Buffalo Bio. A lot of those improvements there are new. Some of the landscaping.
We haven't had the ribbon cutting. We haven't had the ribbon cutting yet. I was over there last night along Buffalo Bio, and I think it's, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and we're supposed to have the big grand opening. It is the acid test for those improvements, and frankly, from just at the level of the water was last night, it looks like a lot of it held up pretty well. It is designed to accommodate floods, and you have to understand that the work in the bio started from way below the water line in terms of bank stabilization, and working back, flattening some of it out to have more capacity. The only thing I'm worried about really at this point is whether, as they clean it off, we have a lot of, there are lights down there, and whether the electrical components made it through, but we don't have a full damage assessment at this point.
You talked about the kind of downward estimate on the number of structures damaged from, what, 4,000 yesterday to about 1,400?
I want to make a distinction. We were talking about water in people's homes, which if it's in your home, it's catastrophic for you, but structural damage is a different, and the number I was giving today is really the structural damage, depending on, the height of the water in the house. It's, if the water comes in and you get a few inches in your house, you got to replace the carpet and you got a mess, but you may not have any structural damage, and so we're trying to draw that distinction.
So are you still at about 4,000 or 5,000 homes with water damage and then 1,400 with structural damage?
I got people out all over the city trying to assess that today. We're not sure. The current number I have from the reports that have been turned in is 1,400 with structural damage, and we're beginning to walk back from the 4,000, but it's hard to tell. Unless we see that this, on aerial photos that this house was underwater, someone calls us, or we go out there and we see a problem, we may not know the full extent.
So at this point, it's just a matter of getting in some of these homes and figuring out, yes, lots of damage, no,
Yeah.
that was mine.
Right.
Mayor, you chimed in when Councilman Green talked about sort of his frustration with the lack of federal funding on the Braesfire project, and you mentioned some public officials who were obviously in front of the cameras yesterday, and maybe sort of them actively working against the funding. Can you elaborate on that?
The Army Corps of Engineers and the Harris County Flood Control worked to redo the portions of Braes Bio that suffered significant flooding in Allison, and in fact overflowed into the Texas Medical Center. There have been a lot of, where they did the bulk of that work, we didn't have the structural flooding, but it was anticipated that there's another phase to go so as they work up, and that has not been accomplished yet, and federal dollars have largely dried up. There are a number of conservative representatives of the state who have, they're budget hawks, and they've cut funding for those types of infrastructure programs. We believe that just a cursory cost-benefit analysis would say that what we can do to protect an asset like the Texas Medical Center, or the hundreds of homes that we know were inundated, it's worth the cost. This is not a situation where we have what is essentially river flooding on an annual basis. This is a relatively rare occurrence under unusual circumstances, and we have been addressing it. We hope that federal government will authorize full funding to complete the Braes Bio work.
Could you talk a little bit about state funding as a result of the governor's disaster?
Doesn't trigger any state funding. This is simply the disaster declaration involves federal resources under FEMA, and it's interesting process. There are thresholds that the state would have to meet and the area would have to meet in order to receive the funding. Just having damage is not sufficient. You have to have a dollar value and a certain amount of property damage, particularly in low-income areas. So we're tracking it to see if that reimbursement's available.
Is there a preliminary figure yet on damages citywide?
No, not a clue. I don't even want to put a number out and try to speculate.
Mayor, unrelated to the flooding issue, there was quite a bit of talk today about the Kroger tax breaks. You saw some opposition from several council members. In the original presentation, the sort of but-for was based on this idea that it would have cost $18 million to do in Indiana, but just $17 million here. So if that's the gap and it's cheaper here, why even Why even pursue this?
We don't go knocking on companies' doors to say, do you need government assistance for your company? In fact, Houston has a fairly robust economy, and we, other than 380s, which involve a company making an investment and then us reimbursing it, I'm very leery of tax abatements. This is one where the Kroger came to my economic development office and said, we are renovating our existing distribution center. We're not going anywhere. We want to renovate it, but we have a potential to expand it, and the company's trying to make the decision whether to expand this one here in Houston or one in Indiana. And we've looked at the numbers, and they're pretty close, but we think some local incentives would help us to make the decision for Houston. And so we looked at their numbers, we did our own analysis, and decided that is worth bringing to council. All we had today was the public hearing. We haven't taken a vote yet. And you really didn't hear council members talking about the merits of the proposal. Largely what you heard council members talking about, and not really about the merits of Kroger versus HEB or some other company. It was a frustration that Houston continues to have problems with food deserts, and all of the major grocery chains have very similar methods of evaluating where they put grocery stores. And so you heard council members who represent food desert areas kind of venting at the representatives of Kroger because of the overall problem.
But it is cheaper, and I understand you're sort of saying you wanted to add extra incentive, but it is already cheaper for them to expand here than it would be in Indiana.
I'm sorry, it's been a long day, and my recollection of the project, they came to us and said, this is the delta between the two deals. Can you get there? They actually asked for $1 million in tax rebates, which spread out over 10 years, and we came back and said, no, we don't think your numbers add up to that. More like $60,000 a year, or slightly going up, so it's something like $750,000 or something. We did our own analysis of the cost of locating in either place.
Mayor, how would you grade the city's response over the last 24, 36 hours to the flooding?
Grade the city's response?
Yes.
I think the first responders were excellent. I think our infrastructure acted as it should and as would have been expected under the weather conditions that we experienced. I think for the most part, Houstonians were careful and cautious, and again, it's frustrating to lose your car in a flood, but a lot of folks, they hit that high water, and the water came up very, very fast. Did use their common sense, they got out of there, and they went to safety, and they've been looking out for each other and working well together. I said from the one city facility that suffered damage, and we don't know the extent of the damage yet, was over here, and that was a big F on the person who made that decision for our parking garage. But overall, I think considering the extent of the rain and the flooding, the city of Houston came through pretty darn well.
The dry run for the start of hurricane season?
I hope not. Cancel that thought. Really, cancel that thought. And a lot of the firefighters who were early Sunday morning, we had 200 firefighters responding to a major apartment tornado, and we displaced hundreds of people out of the 11 buildings that had significant damage. And so we had firefighters out there all day Sunday, and for their shift, and then other firefighters had to come in right after that, and so the personnel were worked pretty good over this. Police officers because of the way the water came up for the rain on Monday night, a night shift had to be held over because day shift couldn't get in. So again, a lot of first responders went above and beyond, and they did their duty, and they did it really well. We hope that it's not a precursor to a hurricane, but the command system worked really well. So the only thing that didn't work as we expected it to, Judge Emmett and I, while we did communicate, we had committed to being in the same place, which would have been Transtar, but I couldn't get there, so we made you guys talk to us in different places. That's the only thing that didn't work as we expected.
So overall, pleased with how things went?
Very, very pleased with how things went. But anytime we lose somebody here in a weather event, you examine what happened and whether there's something we could have done better. And so we'll do a complete situation analysis. We'll examine every aspect of the response, because we want to, for those people who lost their lives, the families of those people who lost their lives, we owe it to them to look at whether there's anything we could possibly do better the next time around. At this point, I think all city personnel performed in an exemplary manner.
In that respect, Mayor, what are some of the questions you'd be asking?
Again, well, I know, she wants me to go. She wants me to go.
No,
I'm just going to say. I know, but to the question, Houston, we built this great city on the coastal prairie, and we have 10 rivers. We happen to call them bios, but they're 10 little rivers that run through Houston, and we are prone to torrential rains, and so the idea that, and the streets are part of our drainage system, so the idea that Houston, you could put enough money into the system where Houston would never have any flooding anywhere is not a realistic position. And so therefore, we have put mechanisms in place where areas we know are trouble spots to try to keep people out of the high water. Now, I don't know the circumstances for those folks who drowned in this instance in their vehicles, but we always go back and we look at the location, if they had arms or gates, did they work, if they had sensors, were they working, did we get the officers out fast enough with their squad cars to block people, but those kinds of things we're going to do, and we do every time. In terms of the flooding along the bios, again, we will do a full analysis of Bray's bio and quantify whether the work on the phase 2 of the Bray's bio project, or phase 3, I don't know what phase it is, I think it's phase 3, and whether that next phase would have prevented the flooding, and we're going to try to quantify it. And all of those things we will do. The first responders will go through and analyze whether communications flowed appropriately, whether they had the tools they needed out in the field, where we deploy high water vehicles, and for high water rescue, I know there are folks who are complaining that they were stuck on the side of the road and they kept calling the city, the city didn't come. That's because we were taking care of more critical issues. And again, so is there a better way to get the word out? Is there a better way to, we didn't pre-deploy resources. We have resources across the city. We didn't pre-deploy. In a hurricane, when we know it's coming, we station high water vehicles at critical sites so we can go out. What we were doing in this instance, since we were doing it on the fly, we were using the vehicles we had on hand, resulting in some of the vehicles. I'm not going to second guess whether fire captain sends his fire truck into high water to pull somebody to safety. He's the guy on the apparatus. But every one of those instances we're gonna look at and see if we can do better. And since this event started at the middle of a Houston Rockets playoff victory, and I want to thank Racquetball and the Toyota Center for allowing some folks to hang out there while the water receded. Let's all cheer on the Rockets tonight. Go Rockets. I would not look good with a Steph Curry mouthpiece hanging out of my mouth. So,
Thank you, Mayor.